Yes, so again, welcome everyone to this Let's Code Together webinar. My name is Jane Knight and I'm an instructor with the MSSO. And as I say, I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Caroline Wilson. So let's get started. So the first slide explains that MEDRA was an ICH initiative. MEDRA is owned by ICH and the MSSO were put in place on contract to maintain and distribute MEDRA. The activities of the MSSO are overseen by a a management committee with representatives from the ICH regions, both the regulatory authorities and the industry. The second slide is a copyright, just it says that the material that we're going to present today is owned by ICH, just like MEDRA itself is owned by ICH. So this is a new idea. This is the second time we've run this webinar. We did one last month. And it came about because when we do webinars, we ask for feedback at the end, and attendees repeatedly ask us for more practical coding examples and especially complex terms. So we've put this session together in response to that. This is our second pilot session. So we are very much interested in your comments and your feedback at the end of the session. It's a workshop format. It's not a formal presentation like our other webinars, and it allows for interactive learning. And by this, what we want is we want you to interact in some polling activities that we're going to be doing, some quizzes throughout the session. And also you're welcome to send us comments as we go along through the questions panel in the right-hand side. So if you look you've got a questions pane. There's too many of you online today to do it verbally. So we ask you to send your comments or your questions through the questions function. And our plan now is to offer monthly sessions, with each month having new examples. And sometimes we're going to focus on some specific challenging topics. So we have been requested to do things like medication errors and special situations. So we're going to be doing some of those in the new year in our planned sessions. I mentioned there's going to be some quizzes. So this is how we'll do it. You can participate either with a mobile phone or with your computer. What you need to do is to open an internet browsing session and you type in to the URL field at the top, polev.com. Then it will ask you for a username. Now it's completely anonymous, so we don't want your own name. You need to put my name, so Jane Knight 855. You enter that, as you see on the screen now, as the username, and that will then allow you to join, and it will link you up to our presentation. So as I've mentioned, we're going to be using the questions panel for you to comment and ask questions. Sometimes we may not all agree on the term that we're proposing for the verbatim we've presented, but we will have some discussion, and it may be that if we can't agree, we need to agree to disagree, just in the interest of time for everyone online. We can't also take requests to code specific verbatim terms via the questions. So please don't send us a how do I code this on the questions. You can ask questions about the examples we've presented and the principles on coding, but not specific verbatims of your own. At the end, there will be an interactive survey, and you'll also be sent a link to a follow-up survey, and there will be an option for you to propose new examples if you want to, but these must be things that are of general interest, and we'll have a look at them, and if it's something that we think will be a learning point, we can include it for a future session. So where are you joining from today? Here's the first polling. I see that some of you have joined us already. We've got Russia, India, Europe, Portugal, I see, UK, France, Italy, Egypt, and a lot more across Europe. Go to the Czech Republic.
Buon dia, dobry dzień, buongiorno, guten Morgen, good morning.
Good morning. Very good. Thank you. And then we want, in order to make it interactive also, we would suggest that if you want, you can look in your own browser So you can join us. We'll give you time. You can open the web-based browser, or if you have the desktop browser on your machine, you can open your own browser and look at how would you code the terms that we present. If you don't have your web-based browser log in with you, we've got one here. This is a temporary demonstration password. You may continue to use your own password if you want, but here's a password. If you don't have access to the browser, you can use this to give you access just for this session. And you do it, if you look, there's our homepage. You go to our medra.org website and you can use the shortcut link on the top right to the web-based browser. So if you need that, maybe you want to take a snapshot of the screen so that I can move on. So challenges in coding. Sometimes there may not always be an exact match to the verbatim that you're presented, and this is what makes coding interesting. Sometimes there may be more than one possible approach, more than one possible LLT that you find when you look in the browser. Sometimes even the points to consider document acknowledges that there may be several options and they give us a preferred option. Sometimes even we understand terms differently. Carol Ann and I have found this in preparing for the sessions. We have a different understanding sometimes of what the term means or how we would code it. And sometimes the term is not ideal, is such that we need to make what we call a best approximation for it. But overall, the rule stands fast that we must always code as reported without making any assumptions. And you'll see that as we go through the examples today. It's like this. You get these optical illusions, don't you? What do you see here? Now, I might look at it. If I look towards the left, I can see there's a young woman looking away from us with in profile. Or if I look towards the right-hand side, I can see that there's quite an elderly looking gentleman with a moustache looking down. Looks like he's got his eyes closed. So what is it? Which way? Who's to say that what I see is correct and that what you may see a different figure, yours might be wrong, yours might be right, yours might be wrong. I might be right or wrong. Neither of us may be wrong. And it is like that sometimes with coding. Here's another one just for a bit of fun. Which building is in the forefront here? Is it the grey building on the left? Is that one in the forefront, or is it the brown building? Which one is in front? Again, who's to say what's right, what's wrong? And really coding is a mix between medical judgment and rules. So it's a balance between the coding rules, which give us consistency, and medical judgment, which allows us to see every term in its own right and to manage the risk to patients. We use medical references for understanding reports and making decisions. And sometimes even with references and using medical judgment, you still find that you can't find a MEDRA term available and you need to request a new term is added to represent that concept. So having said all that, I've given you the instructions, given you the caveats that we're all human and we have different views sometimes. So let's code together. Carol Ann, would you like to take us on with our first example?
Yes, but I'm still not able to share. You have to make me presenter.
I'll hand over to you. There we are.
Yes, and we have one question I couldn't answer, Jane, for now. It's if there's a telephone number from Germany to join. The only one that is shown on the screen is the UK number. I didn't know how to find it. Maybe you can do so.
Okay. Okay, I'll have a look for that, Carol Ann, while you're doing your next section.
Okay, so I hope that you can see my screen now. Let's start with our first exercise, our first example. Here's our first reported term. Headache due to bumping head. So remember the basic MEDRA coding rule that we always repeat in all of our coding webinars: code as reported. So do not add and do not omit relevant medical information. What is reported here in this instance is not just a simple headache, but it is a headache with a specific etiology. The patient has hit the head, and due to this injury, this trauma, then suffered the headache. So now what would you look for? What could be a suitable combination term for the reported condition? Or would you need to split this term in order to capture the full information? So please check in the browser, as Jane just mentioned, using the Medra browser or your own browser, what would be the most appropriate term, considering the reported information? Headache due to bumping head. So after this trauma, the patient suffered headache. Post-traumatic headache. Yes, post-traumatic headache would be the correct term. No need to split in this instance because we have a combination term that perfectly captures the reported condition, both the etiology, the traumatic origin, as well as the underlying condition, the basic medical concept, the headache. Perfect. You have found the suitable term. Now let me switch screens and show you how to find these terms and how to handle them. I will go to the browser now, myself. Here we are. And this is what we looked for. We have looked for post-traumatic headache. But now let's look into this more broadly. So we know that these terms are represented in the injury sock, so we can narrow down our search to this system organ class and do our search. And we find a lot of terms, also our headache post-traumatic. Let's look at the PTs only. Here we have post-traumatic epilepsy, post-traumatic neuralgia, post-traumatic osteoporosis. You see that there are a lot of terms that are grouped under this injury sock. Now, what if I click on them, like post-traumatic headache, for example? You can see the linkages here. So post-traumatic headache has its primary sock in nervous system disorders, but has, of course, a linkage to the injury sock. Then post-traumatic neuralgia is represented in the primary sock nervous system disorders, but has a linkage to the secondary sock injury in order to represent the etiology in the terminology. And this is also true for the other PTs that we are looking at here. But do not expect that all these post-traumatic conditions include the wording post-traumatic or traumatic. There are some terms that do not include this information. Let's look at, for example, subdural hem, in order to capture both the subdural hematoma and the hemorrhage, and look for this one now. And we say that we have terms here: spinal subdural hematomas, spinal subdural hemorrhage, and the same for just subdural hematoma and subdural hemorrhage. So these do not include the string post-traumatic, but they are still, as you can see here, it's still represented in the injury sock, even in the primary sock injury, with only secondary linkages to nervous system and vascular. So sometimes the etiology, in this instance post-traumatic, is really captured by the hierarchy, not really by the specific wording of the term. And the same was true for subdural hemorrhage, for instance. Same condition. Now, what about subarachnoid hemorrhage or hematoma? Here we have again, let's look at the PTs to have it more narrow here. Here we have our subarachnoid hemorrhage, and you see that it is only grouped in central nervous system disorders. So it has secondary linkages to injury sock, but not as primary linkage. So because these conditions are most often reported in the setting of a ruptured cerebral aneurysm or arteriovenous malformation. So somehow you see in the Medra hierarchy, you can really read the etiology of the condition, even if the wording of the term itself does not include this information. This is what I wanted to show you here. Now let's continue with our presentation.
So Caroline, we've got a comment there that one of our groups says that despite it being an injury, they would choose the primary shock of nervous system disorder. So do you want to speak a bit more about why you chose the injury shock?
Yes. So the injury shock in the instance of the subdural hematoma and the subdural hemorrhage is really that most of these events are really caused by injuries, by head trauma. So that's why here the primary shock is really the injury shock. In other instances, they may have other etiologies, but only in a few cases may have also a traumatic etiology. And that's when the etiology is only represented by the secondary linkage. So you should not change the primary shock linkage, of course. This is really defined by Medra. This is one of our basic rules. Even if your database allows to do so, don't do that. This would really put at risk the strengths of Medra. That is really standardization, harmonization, the way we speak and exchange information about safety information of medicinal products. So don't do that. Follow the Medra hierarchy, read the Medra hierarchy, always check the Medra hierarchy if you select a Medra term, but do not change it by yourself ad hoc. If you find that some linkage is not correct, then please submit a change request.
And you wouldn't just choose headache, would you? Because you're told in the term that it's due to. So when something is due to, you know the etiology. If it had said different wording, but because it says due to, there's very much a clear link there between the two, isn't there?
Yeah. So due to, secondary to, caused by are to be considered synonyms. So here we really have a post-traumatic headache, a headache that it was caused by a trauma.
Thank you.
Something also that needs to be included in coding conventions, and also coders should be aware of this. Due to, secondary to, caused by, originating from, all indicate causality.
Thank you.
So these are the learning points that you can take from this exercise. First of all, identify all elements in your verbatim. In this instance, both the trauma as well as the headache, so the underlying condition. And if you have internal coding conventions, it may be helpful to add a corresponding guidance for the coders, saying that if a condition is reported that has a traumatic etiology, it is not mandatory to really select a term that includes the information traumatic, because if no such term is available in Medra, it would be sufficient to select a term representing the basic concept, provided that it has a linkage to the injury shock, this way capturing the traumatic etiology of the condition. So this is something that is really important, because otherwise coders get confused and don't know whether they need to split the term or whether they should code headache only, etc.
So Caroline, we've got a question, we've got a comment on that one. Someone's saying, the way Medra is structured, is there a rule as to when is the injury the primary shock? For example, post-traumatic headache is secondary, but traumatic arthritis is primary. So how do our team of IMOs decide what becomes primary and secondary to the injuries?
There are some rules that are really explained in the introductory guide for the Medra terminology that you can read. So they are very specific, and it's really worthwhile to read them in order to better understand the rules that are behind primary shock assignment.
Not all the terms in the injuries are primary. It isn't it's not one of the priority stock. A lot of them are primary to injuries, but not all of them.
Yeah.
It's a term by term basis, isn't it? In some cases as well.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Another question, Jane?
No, that's all the questions so far on that one, but thank you for that.
Now, the next one. What we have here is a reported periorbital eczema. So what area is affected by the eczema here? Is it the eyelids? And what would be the closest LLT? This illustration intends to clarify what periorbital actually means, to which area the term refers. And it seems to be a bit more than just the eyelids, as you can see. How would you decide now? Which LLT would you select? Would you select eczema eyelids? Would you rather go for eczema facial or contact eczema, erythematous rash, eczema weeping? What would you select? So some of you would choose eczema eyelids, others go for eczema facial.
Well, somebody would go for rash. It's interesting to see the different socks there as well, Caroline. The eczema is in the eye sock, whereas that's quite, unless you check the hierarchy, you wouldn't notice that. I wouldn't have noticed.
So the eyelids are really considered an eye structure by MEDRA. So all conditions that relate to the eyelids are considered eye conditions. So you have made your choice. Now let me show in the browser again. So if we look for periorbital eczema, we don't find any result. Oh, I'm still with the injury sock. Never forget to clear your selection if you have narrowed down your search to a system organ class. Good example here. So again, but you won't find any suitable term. So here you have to look into this more broadly. You may either say eyelid, take a narrow approach, and then you would find eczema eyelids, right click, go to browser, and you would see, doesn't show, takes a while, go to browser. Here we are. You see it's represented in eye disorders, primary sock, but also in sock skin with a secondary linkage. Here it is. So, and if we now say, well, we would like to take a more conservative approach, a broader approach, we would go for something like face, for example, and search for it. This is how you would look for it. And here we have it, eczema facial. If you click on this term, you see again the hierarchy. And here you see, because there is no eyelid included, it's only grouped under skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders. So this would be the options that you can choose from. And to be honest, both of them are correct. Let me switch back to my presentation. Sometimes really, as Jane mentioned during the introduction, there is no right or wrong solution. So you have to reference the anatomical site. Yes, you should not assume. You should check the MEDRA hierarchy. But here you can either take a narrow approach and say, well, I take it as an eyelid eczema, or you take a more conservative, a broader approach and go to facial eczema. Both are correct. But whatever you decide to do, then document your rules and train your coding staff accordingly. These are the learning points from this example.
Sometimes you can look in the browser as well, as you said, and look for the where other periorbital terms are placed, can't you?
Yes, we can do so. We can do so and check for other terms. Let's just enter periorbital. and search, and you will see that there are quite a number of periorbital terms
Sometimes
in
I do
Medra.
that and see where that falls, and see if I can learn anything from the hierarchy of those. Sometimes when that kind of thing happens.
Yeah, sometimes if you look into these terms, you will see that some of them, like periorbital pain, for example, they are represented, really the periorbital is represented on PT level. And here the periorbital pain is of course grouped under eye disorders. But in other instances, like here periorbital pruritus, for example, then the periorbital information is lost on PT level. So just the pruritus is captured. So Medra itself makes a prioritization here. In some instances, the periorbital information is captured on PT level. In others, it's not.
It's not so.
And then, yeah, all of these PTs that really contain the information periorbital, if you look at them, you will see that they are always linked to eye disorders. They are always linked to eye disorders because, as I told you, the periorbital region, the eyelids, are considered eye structures in Medra. But they may also have additional linkages, not only to the eye sock. Like, for instance, periorbital abscess. This, of course, has an infectious etiology, so you will find it in primary sock infections and infestations only with a secondary linkage to eye disorders. Same holds true for periorbital cellulitis. In other instances, like, for instance, periorbital hematoma, you will find several secondary linkages, not only to skin, that would also be the manifestation site, not only the eye, but it's the anatomical structure is the skin, but you will also find the vascular disorders, because here we are talking about a bleeding. It's a hematoma.
That shows what you said before, Caroline, about the injuries, how important it is to familiarise yourself with the Medra structural rules in the introductory guide to know how terms are placed. Because some of the rules are really hard and fast rules, aren't they? Like the infections, and so if you pick that up from the intro guide, help you understand.
Yeah, so all infections, infestations terms always have their primary sock and sock infections. Same holds true for neoplastic terms or for congenital terms, hereditary conditions. These always have primary sock, either congenital or neoplasms. So these are the three system organ classes that are always primary for their respective terms. Now let's look at the last one, periorbital edema. Here we see that it's again linked to primary sock eye disorders, but here we have a linkage to immune system disorders as well, because both periorbital edema and periorbital swelling may, of course, have an immune etiology because of angioedema, for example.
Good. Thank you. And then we have one question on that. Is this something that you would consider to request as a change request, periorbital edema or periorbital eczema? Or do you think it doesn't make any, you're not really gaining a lot, are you really?
Yeah, to be honest, I really, when I was still working for industry, I was submitting a lot of Medra change requests, but I always prioritized these change requests. And I think it's in this instance, it's not worthwhile.
I don't think you gain an awful lot. I agree.
No.
I agree. So thank you, Caroline.
Okay. Now I hand over to you.
Thank you. So erythematous papules on the face, another rash term here. So what's being reported here? What do we know? What can we make sense of? How can we capture all the elements? Well, we're told it's erythematous and it's papules and it's on the face. So we've got three pieces of information there, and maybe we need to prioritize those. Can we find a term that captures all three, or would we need some kind of coding conventions? I remember when I worked in the industry, we used to have coding conventions for the rashes because sometimes you just couldn't capture everything that was being told the way the rash was being described. And sometimes there might be a MEDRA LLT. So if we have a look at the next slide, we'll see. So what we're going to do for you now is a little bit of a quiz and to see, can you make sense of it? Because the way I taught new staff when in my team years ago now was break it down and work out, what does it mean? So what does papule or papula actually mean when it describes a rash? Is it red, spotty, raised, blistered? Well, you're not quite sure. Ourselves are not quite sure on that one. So my understanding is that papula on that one would mean raised. A papule is a raised part, skin, like part of a rash, really. But it would be the raised part on that one. So let's try another one. What does macula mean? So what's the difference? You sometimes see macula and papula reported together. So what's the difference? Well, what does that one mean? Macula means spotty. Well, I think we're all agreed on that one. Macula means spotty. I agree with you. Spotty. For macules are spots. So these are the individual. Next one, Carol Ann. Let's see what the next one we've got is. Erythro. This is a bit easier, isn't it? What does erythro mean? So we've got erythro with our papules. So 100% of you so far say they're red. Yes, erythro, like erythrocytes, erythema. Erythro means red. So we know then that we've got erythematous, so that means red. Papules, so raised. Erythro and papula. And we're looking for what we can make of that. So do we have any more? Let's see what's our next slide. I think that was all of them, wasn't it? So I would then go to my browser. We've done a screenshot here out of quickness. We would go and check the hierarchy. Now, looking in the skin SOC, we look down, and within the HLGT of epidermal and dermal conditions, that's when you see all the rashes grouped together. So we've got an HLT there of rashes, eruptions, and exanthems, not elsewhere classified, but there are other rashes in some of the others. So if we look then, if you click again, Carol Ann, I've opened that HLT to show you how many of the rashes fall under that HLT. You can click again. It'll highlight the name at the top there, that HLT of rashes, eruptions, and exanthems. So it does have terms in it like maculopapula. So we've got the spotty and the raised there, rash maculopapula, rash macula, erythematous, rash papula. So we would be looking for something erythro and papula, wouldn't we, for that one? So we'd be going for erythropapula if there is such a thing. So one of the things to see there is, well, a lot of them are grouped together, and at the HLT, they lose the specificity. But if we look up, there's a lot of others there. I'm going to hand over to Carol Ann now to explain to us more about some of the other categories and why they are at the HLT level.
Thank you, Jane. So the types of rashes represented by Jane are grouped under this HLT, rashes, eruptions, and exanthems, NEC, not elsewhere classified. They represent, so to say, more simple rashes, which are classified based on their appearance. And you see some of them listed on the right-hand side. Jane already explained that. But other HLTs under this HLGT, epidermal and dermal conditions, also group rashes, either more specific ones, which have a specific etiology, like, for instance, the pustular rashes, the postular conditions here, or rashes which represent more severe, even serious conditions, like the Bolus conditions, for instance. Let's look into these in more detail now. So here's the MEDRA term for pustular rashes. What exactly does pustular mean? Please make your choice. Yeah, these are blisters, but they are specific blisters because they are pus-filled blisters. So they represent an infectious condition, so to say. And what does bullous mean? You you have already reached this question. Swollen. Yes, it's swollen, but it's not specific enough. What bullous means is it is blistered. It's round blisters that, of course, then represent a swollen condition of the skin. But the basic concept is the blister for the bullous conditions. Now let's browse MEDRA again and look for additional HLTs under this HLGT epidermal and dermal conditions. Here we are again. Let's go into the skin sock here. And here we have our skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders, NEC. Oops, no. Here we are.
Skin, epidermal and dermal.
Here. Yeah, here we are. Here we are. I got lost in space here. Here we are, epidermodermal conditions. Here are all our HLTs we looked at before in the previous slide. So let's look at the bullous conditions first. So the bullous conditions, they represent really severe conditions. You see terms like epidermolysis bullosa. You see terms like Stevens-Johnson syndrome, toxic epidermal necrolysis, all of these representing really severe, serious medical conditions. So bullae are not to be confused with the vesicles. You should be aware of. You really have to make yourself familiar with these specific terms. Vesicles are small blisters, so less than 5 millimeters in diameter, whereas bullae have a larger diameter, more than these 5 millimeters, often larger than 1 centimeter, for example. So these are the bullous conditions, all grouped separately because they may represent really severe medical conditions. That's why they are handled separately in the MEDRA hierarchy. Now let's look at another group, the exfoliative conditions, for instance. Here we have a PT, very specific PT, exfoliative rash. So again, these exfoliative conditions represent more severe conditions. And you see terms like dermatitis exfoliative generalized, for example, in here with erythroderma underneath. So again, they are handled separately because they may represent more severe, more even serious medical conditions. Let's look at the next one. Squamous conditions, for instance. So squamous conditions groups PTs for quite a heterogeneous group of disorders. Their lesions are characterized by scaly papules and plaques, and the major entities in this group include skin conditions like, for instance, psoriasis, lichen planus, or lichen nitidus. All of these terms are grouped under this specific HLT based on their appearance that is very specific and special. Next one. Here we have the HLT photosensitivity and photodermatosis conditions. Let's explore this one. And you will find a term like photosensitivity reaction here. And underneath you find the photosensitive rash. So again, it's very specific etiology here. Here, these terms are grouped based on etiology. And the photosensitive rash, of course, has a specific etiology. It's caused by sun exposure. Next one, psoriatic conditions. Here we have the dermatitis psoriasiform, and underneath we have the rash psoriaform or psoriasiform. So again, here you see that some of the rash terms are grouped under dermatitis terms, or in the instance of the photosensitivity rash, even under a reaction term. So you should really look into the LLT level to find suitable LLTs, because sometimes the PT name may not contain the information rash or eruption or exanthem. And next that we have here, let me show, are now the postular conditions. We talked about them already, and we have the rash postular underneath. Here it is. You see that it has a green square around it, so it hasn't its primary sock in this skin sock. Let's check the hierarchy again here. You see, because the pustules, pustular, pus-filled blisters, they all represent infectious conditions, and that's why the primary sock is infections and infestations in this instance, and there is of course a secondary linkage to the skin sock. Next, we are coming to a group of terms that we didn't address yet. So this is, let me collapse all in order to have a better overview here. Let's talk about the HLT dermatitis ascribed to a specific agent. So here we have again rashes or eruptions with a specific etiology. Here you'll find, for example, LLT and PT toxic skin eruption with primary linkage to sock skin, but also secondary linkage to immune system disorders and injury. And but additional linkage, these additional linkages really represent the etiology again. And in the last example, we are again looking at a rash with a specific etiology here. Let me check the next slide. Here we are with our examples. We have been talking about the radiation skin injury. So if you have a verbatim like a radiation-induced skin eruption, then you would find radiation skin injury. So here, this is of course represented in the injury sock, and you see that this LLT does not contain the information rash or eruption, but it's really important to always capture the etiology of a rash, eruption, exanthema when it's reported. We talked about the postular rashes. Here we have another example. We have a red macular rash due to candida, and you'll find a candida rash in medra. So, and of course, because this is an infectious condition, you will find it in infections, infestations as primary sock, with secondary linkage, of course, to skin disorders. You will also find other terms like PT viral rash or LLT bacterial rash, other medra terms representing infectious rashes. The next one is an interesting one. Here we have an urticarial allergic rash after gardening. So we have three informations here: urticaria, allergy, and rash. So let's go back to the browser again in order to check how to find the best term here. If I enter allergic, string, and then rash, and urticaria, urtic, always use word stems to really have a broad approach for your searches. And I find no results. Bad luck. So let's try with allergic rash in search. And here we have an allergic rash. So it was not reported that it was a drug rash. So we have an allergic rash, and this allergic rash is grouped in primary sock skin disorders, has of course a linkage to immune system disorders representing the etiology Here, the manifestation site is represented in skin, and it is grouped under PT dermatitis allergic. So again, a rash term that is grouped under a dermatitis term. But we are losing the information urticaria, and urticaria is somehow a more severe type of rash we would like to capture. So let's try with allergic urticaria. And here we have a direct match, allergic urticaria. And when again exploring the hierarchy, clicking on the term name, you see again it's grouped under primary SOC skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders based on manifestation site. It is a rash, of course. Urticaria is a rash, a skin condition, but it has a secondary linkage to immune system disorders as well. So it is the same, again, an example where checking the hierarchy of a given term is really important, because here you see that allergic urticaria would capture the information of the verbatim that it is an allergy and that it is an urticaria, and the etiology, the allergy again, would also be captured even on the PT level with the PT urticaria, because it is an immune system disorder. It is grouped under secondary SOC immune system disorder. So this is how prioritization in MedDRA, linkages in MedDRA are really helpful to explore in order to find the most suitable term for the reported condition.
That's interesting, Caroline, because sometimes I put these examples on this slide for you, and it seems like maybe you and I would have disagreed even on the LLT level, which was the closest, even between ourselves, that we would go for the PT, for example, would be the same, but you and I may have chosen different LLTs in our choice. So it's interesting to see. Yeah,
that could be, what is really important for of course, you should try to be as consistent as possible also on LLT level. But what is most important for data presentation, data retrieval, data analysis purposes is really the PT level. So here you should really aim for high level of consistency and accuracy, of course. Let me switch back to my examples again. And here we have our last example, again, looking at a rash with a specific etiology. What we have here is a rash due to underlying malignancy. It is not a malignant condition per se, but it is a concurrent condition of an underlying malignant disease, a so-called paraneoplastic condition. It is also, so we have an LLT, perfect LLT for what is reported here, LLT paraneoplastic rash. So capturing the paraneoplastic condition. It is also grouped under the HLT rashes, eruptions, and exanthems. I forgot to click here in order to show you system organ classes. But it has a primary linkage to skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders because it is a rash and per se does not represent a malignant disorder, a cancer. But it has, of course, a secondary linkage to SOC neoplasms, like all paraneoplastic terms. Do we have questions?
Interesting. No, nothing. Which medical dictionary do you recommend to verify the different adjectives? Is the question we
will come to this. We will come to this in a minute. Okay. It's a Dorland's. It's a Dorland's medical dictionary. One last comment on the rashes. We are again looking at the HLT dermatitis ascribed to a specific agent. So we had this before when talking about the toxic skin eruption. But there are also two additional PTs that are relevant to distinguish in this grouping, in this HLT. These are the PT drug eruption and the PT fixed eruption with the LLT fixed drug eruption, so fixed drug rash exanthema. And let us look at the primary MedRA reference. Here, the Dorland's Medical Dictionary. Here we come with the Dorland's to see how we can distinguish these medical concepts. Here we have the definitions from Dorland's. A drug eruption is an adverse cutaneous reaction produced by ingestion, parenteral use, or local application of a drug, which may produce various morphological patterns and type of lesions. We talked about these appearances. So this drug eruption can also be called drug-induced dermatitis, dermatitis medicamentosa, or drug rash. Now, a fixed drug eruption is a drug eruption that recurs at the same site as a fixed eruption, meaning that it is an allergic reaction to a drug that recurs at the same body site or body sites each time a particular drug is administered. So make sure to also clearly distinguish these two concepts. If a rash is really an exanthema, an eruption is really reported as drug-related, then choose one of these two PTs, either drug eruption or fixed drug eruption, depending on what has been reported. Make sure to clearly distinguish these two concepts. You could see at the end that the whole topic rashes, eruptions, exanthemas is quite complex and a truly challenging coding topic. But because of the fact that these conditions are really frequently reported, you should make yourself familiar with these terms and to really clearly distinguish these terms, to be familiar with the hierarchy in order to find the suitable terms for the reported rashes, eruptions. So apply the rules that we just discussed. Capture as much information as possible when selecting the appropriate MedRA term. Always consider the etiology. We talked about trauma, infection, allergies, etc. And also use the MedRA hierarchy to prioritize information, as shown with the previous example of the allergic urticarial rash. And because this coding area is quite complex, it is really recommendable to include respective guidance in your coding conventions. And of course, also to train your coders accordingly, to really assure accuracy of coding and consistency of coding in this area.
Good. Thank you, Caroline. That's really
now
good.
I pass it on to you, Jane, again.
Yes, thank you. So we'll go to our next example, which is, here's one. Tense feeling in stomach is our next one. Can you see my slide, Caroline?
Let me check.
Just want to make sure I am sharing. I think I'm sharing.
No,
yep.
I'm not seeing it yet.
So let me go back to where I want. Let me go back to where I was.
I stopped showing my screen now.
Right. So let me share my screen. Okay, that's it. I wondered, it didn't seem right. So
here it is.
Tense feeling in the stomach. Oh. So I use that button. Right, so tense feeling in stomach. I think you should have the activity in front of you. So what are we going to do with this one? How will you handle this report? Is the term clear enough? Do we actually know what's being reported, or do we need to seek clarification? What's going on with this one? Tense feeling in stomach. Now, this was an actual term that was reported, as all our examples are real live terms that have been reported. And this was one. Oh, that's come big, loud and clear message there. Seek clarification. You're unsure of that one. Clarify, seek clarification. So yes, one of the principles that we talk about in both our points to consider document and our companion guide is the need for quality and clarity in our reported information. Now, somebody's interested, somebody's thinking about stomach irritated feeling, that's what their first thoughts are, where they see that tense feeling. Is the stomach irritated? Well, let's have a look at what abdominal, can't quite make that one out, abdominal something on that one. So abdominal discomfort. Abdominal discomfort. So let's have a look. Definitions again. First thing, before we make a decision, like you, when I first saw that, I was thinking, I'm not sure what this means. And I looked in Dorland's, and here we can look up, what does tense mean? Drawn tight or rigid. And tension is the act of stretching, being stretched or strained. The degree of with anything is stretched or to which anything is stretched or strained. Or it could mean mental, emotional or nervous strain. So for me, when I saw this one, I wasn't sure whether it was some kind of nervous feeling, like we would say, in English, we would say butterflies in your stomach, whether it was that tense feeling, that nervousness that had in the feeling it physically nervous, or whether it was some kind of abdominal distension. So let's go and have a look in the browser. Was it an abdominal rigidity? So let's have a look at tense and see what we get. I'm just going to look up tense and see what I get for tension. Stomach tension. I got 400 terms, so that's not very good, is it? Let's look up stomach. Is there some kind of tense in stomach? No. Do they mean stomach? Do they mean abdominal? Do they mean... Let's have a look up tension then. Tension, we've still got 200, so we've still got to look through. So there's the abdominal distension that I was thinking about when I looked. What else might we have if I look down? Oh, it's a lot, isn't it? So let's have a look. Let's have a look. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to limit to gastrointestinal disorders, and I'm going to repeat the search and see what I get then. I get abdominal distension, intra-abdominal hypertension, no pelvic distension, no. Let's have a look at just tense and limit it to the abdominal distension, lower abdomen, tense feeling of. So what we had reported, if you think back, was feeling, wasn't it? And sometimes when you have these feeling terms, it's a good idea to actually look for feeling or felt or sense, sensation. So that might be a good one to have a look. Let's remove this and I'm going to search again. I'm a bit all over the place with this one. Lower feeling. So we've got feeling tense or lower abdomen feeling tense feeling of. I quite like the look of that one because it's close to the wording, and that has a PT of abdominal discomfort. So that seems like one of you mentioned abdominal discomfort. That seems like that's not a bad match. If we're sure that it is a lower abdomen tense feeling, that goes there. Well, we don't know ours is lower abdomen because ours is stomach. So that's going to be higher up. So, but it does go to the PT of abdominal discomfort, and it's the PT is the concept that we're looking for. But can I be sure that it is that and it isn't a physical symptom of a mental disorder, some kind of nervousness or tension? That's the big question. How comfortable am I with abdominal discomfort? So I'm going to go back to my slide here and see what I've got. So we've done that one. So the learning point is, how comfortable are we to know exactly what is being reported? Now, I think after doing that research, I would be still uncomfortable and I would look to query that. But do we think the PT of abdominal discomfort is good enough? We've looked for feeling and sensation. Do we seek clarification, or if it's still unclear, do we choose a term to capture the feeling like abdominal discomfort? And that is a very personal thing. What's your views on this one, Carol Ann?
Yeah, so if this term would only refer to a mental state, so a psychological condition, I would, of course, code to PT tension under psychiatric disorders. But here, really, an affected body site is reported. It's the stomach, and it is a feeling only. So not an abdominal guarding or stomach rigidity, for example. so an objective clinical sign. It's a feeling only. And here I really would directly go to LLT stomach discomfort that is grouped under PT abdominal discomfort in the same way as MEDRA does, with LLT lower abdomen tense feeling off.
Let me go and have a look at that one. It's interesting you said that. So the discomfort, you would take the discomfort and you would then see, well, if tense feeling of codes to a PT of abdominal discomfort, why don't we try to apply that one? Stomach discomfort, try again and apply the same logic. And there it is, an LLT of stomach discomfort under the PT again of abdominal discomfort. And I'll do a right-hand mouse click, go to browser, and we can see. So whereas I got as far as the abdominal discomfort and I didn't look at the LLTs, here they are, all the LLTs underneath, and we've got the sensation terms, the feeling terms, stomach feeling heavy, stomach discomfort. And that's what you would go, is it, Caroline? You would go stomach discomfort. And so we've got comments in. Magnus agrees with you in our group today. So he'd also suggested that before I asked you. So that's another approach, isn't it? For me, I think I would feel uncomfortable and I would prefer to query. It's a more conservative approach. But like we said at the beginning, there's not one right or wrong in every case.
Yeah. So we had a respective coding guidance, coding rule in our coding convention. So it was clearly documented. And first of all, in order to document and to make our coding rules transparent, and of course, also in order to train our coders so that they apply these rules consistently.
So that's that one. And I'm looking at the time now. I see that we're actually 2 minutes past the hour. So we've come to the end of our session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch now to the end of the session. I'm going to switch to our end and to see. Now let me escape this and we'll come to the end. You see, we've got a lot more examples. We'll be back after Christmas. Today, I think our focus was on the rashes. So after Christmas, we're going to have some new focuses and we've got lots more examples already prepared for you. So it's great to get your questions in and to get comments. And as I say, rashes being an important medical area, as Caroline mentioned, that's why we chose to focus on that today. But we are going to come back after Christmas. We decided after the success and the comments we had from our first session, we are going to continue this in the new year. We've got a session booked for the 26th of January. And if some of you may prefer to join, we've got one in the afternoon European time, which will be suitable for the US. So if there are any of you calling in from the US, or if you'd like to join in an afternoon, you can do that. In the new year, we're going to be doing 2 sessions in one day, but it will be the same examples in the morning and the afternoon. So we are interested in your feedback because it is early days. This is only the second one of these that we've done. And we need you to be honest and give us your thoughts on how we can improve. And if you've enjoyed it, please tell us so that we will know to continue. You also have the opportunity to add in some suggestions for terms you'd like us to code for, to show you the illustration of coding or the principles around those terms. So this is what we're looking for from you now in the Let's Code Together. Oh, I've come to the end in our survey. So anything else, Caroline, that I've forgotten to mention to wrap up today?
No, I think we have mentioned everything.
I
hope to see everybody again next time in January.
Yes, in January. We've had 77 attendees, so that will be 75. We were up into the 80s during the session. So it all depends on how interactive the group is, but that's why we're limiting it, aren't we? So if you are interested, sign up quickly for the sessions in the new year, so that you can book your space. But I would say, though, at this point, because we do limit the sessions, the attendance to the numbers, if you do book and you find you can't attend, please do cancel your place so we can offer it to somebody else. We understand that commitments change and you may not always be able to attend when you've booked. So please do cancel if you can. And we've got people wishing us a Merry Christmas and people thanking us. So thank you all very much. Thank you for your attention today. Thank you. We appreciate that and your interaction.
Thank you also from my end. Happy holidays and a very happy and hopefully healthy new year.
Yes, absolutely. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy your end of year holidays. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Caroline. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.